Welcome back to the Women's Empowerment Project, Rise Up, Kick Ass. I'm your host, Karen Martel, and today we are talking about something that is not talked about often enough for women, which is our menstrual cycle and how sacred it is, and just how we are so, in this day and age, so disconnected from it. And in order to talk about this today, I went out and found the expert. She is from periodlove.com. Can't forget that one. Her name is Jamie Watkins, a womb priestess, Qoya teacher, and filmmaker. Jamie was initiated into the womb mysteries after a painful journey of endometriosis, which led her down a path of listening deeply to her most sacred center. Gaining knowledge of the feminine healing arts and integrating them into her life radically transformed her health, relationships, and purpose. She is passionate about teaching others how to awaken and heal the feminine through period love. Jamie creates sacred spaces to empower others to trust their body's wisdom, unlock their full potential, and live a life of health and wholeness. Welcome, Jamie.
Hello, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
This is so exciting. I'm so happy to have found you, because you can search high and low on the internet and there's not very many people whose niches are the period or the menstrual cycle for a woman. So I really appreciate having you on, and I'm excited about this conversation that we're going to have today.
Amazing. It's true. And for years, I studied with about 10 different teachers over the course of 4 years. So many of the experts that are out there I have studied with. I just went so deep into this work. And so I'm so thrilled to be here. It's my favorite thing to talk about, the things we're not supposed to talk about. The period.
Yeah, nobody really wants to hear about that, do they? But this is why we're doing it. This is to empower women when it comes to their menstrual cycles, and realize that there's really a very strong power to our menstrual cycles. So it wasn't always this way for you. And so can you just tell us how you got into the business of a woman's getting in touch with this? And because you had a painful history of many different stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to. Well, I have been working in production for 15 years. I live in Los Angeles, and had a very demanding career, like many women do, where I was working 12-hour days. And so I didn't have time to be feeling really much of anything, disconnection, period pain, any of those things. And so my period and my pain got louder and louder and louder and louder and louder, until I was not able to ignore it anymore. And so I got so sick with endometriosis. I had stage 4 endometriosis, which is a horrible womb disease. Essentially what happens is the lining of your womb, most women, 90% of women, have backflow menstruation. Whereas if that happened to you, your white blood cells would go, oh, you're not supposed to be here. Whereas my backflow menstruation, I'd have this uterine tissue that was going into my other organs. And my body would say, oh, you're Jamie tissue. Here, why don't you take up residency on the bowel, or pitch a tent here on the bladder, or there's room on the outside of the uterus, you can stay. Problem is, every time I would bleed, all these microscopic little parts that are in the wrong place, this uterine tissue, would also bleed. That was happening to me for over 20 years.
Me too, Jamie. Just FYI, I still suffer with endometriosis. So yes, go on.
Really? Oh,
yes.
You know that. Oh, I'm even more excited to talk to you. It's really intense. And so I really thought, okay, every time I went to a doctor, they said, okay, here's the drugs we're going to give you. There's nothing you can do. It's chronic and incurable. So good luck. But I was in such pain, Karen. I was like, I cannot live like this. This is not okay. As I'm expanding into pain, I'm also equally going to expand into pleasure. So the only way I could get through some of these really painful bouts of endometriosis was to think about, like, okay, I'm going to do reflexology. I'm going to give myself this amazing massage. I'm going to call this friend, and I'm going to go have, French pastries with her. Like, that's what I would think about to get me through the pain. Is I'm being asked to expand in one capacity. And so for my sanity, I have to expand in the other.
Wow.
And then I really thought, I'm going to heal this mind, body, and soul. I'm going to. My body is here for a message. My body is communicating with me. It's not punishing me. And so I really had to go undo some of those cultural and personal and like familial, what's even the word, connections that have been formed to make me say, I'm a woman, and therefore being a woman is pain. You go to the doctor, you tell the doctor, I'm in pain. The doctor says, of course, being a woman is pain. I have more pain. It's called a negative feedback loop. And we have that in our society where we believe, whether it's religiously that we're being punished for something, or culturally that like that's just the way it is because women are inferior, or whatever the story may be. And I thought, this is just not true. And in fact, my body is communicating with me, not punishing me. So where do I start? And I knew that if I wanted my body to stop screaming at me, it's almost like I was in couples counseling with my uterus. And so I sat there and said, okay, uterus, like here we are, couples counseling. I want you to stop screaming at me. What do you have to say? And I literally heard my body say, if you want me to stop screaming, then listen when I whisper.
Wow.
And so I thought, oh, okay. That's it. I need a totally new relationship with my body. And I just started slowly. And it was like my own Da Vinci Code. One thing would lead me to the next right person for my healing, and the next. And I just found out so much information that it became like a quest for me. And I experimented 100% on my own body with what worked, what feels good. And now if I can brag for a second, I'm 39 years old, having survived, not only survived, thrived through endometriosis stage 4. And I'm pregnant now for the first time, having totally unassisted pregnancy. I didn't take one drug, much to the chagrin of my doctor, who called me his most stubborn patient. But, I know that this path works because I am living a pain-free life, and I'm thriving, and my fertility is thriving, and my marriage is thriving, and my relationship with my body is thriving. And so I know that this works, and there's so much magic here for women.
So when this was happening and you were having these kind of revelations about that you needed to connect with your body and that this was the message that you were receiving, how did you even get that? Was that just an intuition that you were just like, hey, hold on a second, my body's obviously trying to tell me something? Or had you read something? Or I remember reading The Red Tent, which I'm sure you've read, I hope. The Red Tent, have you read that?
Yes, of course.
Yes, of course. Okay. For those of you who haven't, read the book. But I remember reading that book, and that was my first step into, oh, wait, the period is supposed to be celebrated. It's supposed to be this amazing, beautiful thing, not something that we cover up and we should be ashamed of and disgusted by because we're bleeding out of our vagina. So was there something that triggered, or was it just a natural, you're just intuitive that way?
No, 100% there was something that triggered it. I was actually listening to an Eckhart Tolle, I think it was A New Earth. I was listening to Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth on audio, and I heard him say one sentence. I've not been able to find it again. I can't find it on the internet, but he said something about, women are more able to reach enlightenment than men, because they're so in tune with their compassionate nature and emotions, but at no time are they more easily able to reach enlightenment than during their menstruation. And then he went on to something else. It was one sentence that I just like felt in my body, and tried to go back to, listen to it a couple times, tried to find it on the internet. So then looking like enlightenment during menstruation, I just found all this information, like different sort of kind of out there woo-woo sites and different sort of teachers. And that was really the first step for me into my journey to where I would literally go to bed and research this topic every night. And I just have notebooks and notebooks of things I was writing down and teachers I would find. And that was actually before I was diagnosed with endometriosis. I just knew my period was really bad and that my pain was really bad. And so I knew my period really had something to tell me after researching a few things. And so that was really the initiating event that got me on the path of just this whole new world of research and
Wow, that's amazing. There's so many. I could go off on like a million different little side things here, but I'll try to stay focused because I was just thinking like how when I went through my own research on like women's sacred bodies, and I can't believe how much stuff has not been talked about, how much stuff I really felt like was hidden. Like you have to dig and dig and dig for research to, it's better nowadays, but when I started, this was about 20 years, 24 years ago. Oh God, I'm old. But yes, but starting to dig and dig and started to like find all this crazy stuff, like how much women were celebrated and we were the ones that kind of were the sacred people that men would look up to and hold high, and our periods were these amazing things. And when you start digging, it's like, holy, have we ever been really suppressed? So let's just go back. I want you to tell us the difference between what it looked like, let's say 10,000 years ago when a woman got her period compared to what it is now. Like, what's the difference there and how we perceive it, basically?
100%. I think that's a great place to start. So there's a Native American saying, excuse me, sorry about that. There's a Native American saying that I love. It says, if you want to destroy a community, first destroy its moon lodge. So a moon lodge is another word for a red tent. So one thing to consider is that before we had artificial light and artificial hormones in our food, the biggest light at night was the moon, when the moon is bright and full. Well, there's a part of your brain, the pineal gland, that it gets triggered with light to ovulate. So all these legends about people are wild and, excuse me, werewolves come out and like the animalistic nature takes over in the full moon. This is because most of nature, or historically, was ovulating, including most humans. That would mean then the opposite side of the spectrum, 2 weeks later, the dark moon or the new moon, when it's darkest out in the sky, when it's hard to find your way, most women then were bleeding. And as you know, if you've ever lived in a sorority like I did, a lot of times when women live together, they sink together. And so oftentimes in communities, women were then bleeding together and they'd go off into moon lodges or red tents. These are visions in all over the world, but let's just take Native American society because that's who we're talking about with this quote. These visions were so important to the chiefs and leaders of Native American tribes that they then informed the decisions of the chief or the leader, when to plant the crops, where to move all the children or the encampments or whatever it is, you know, that they were deciding at the time. So, and then there was no one more revered than the women who then were keeping their wise blood for themselves, meaning the grandmothers who were then menopausal. So there's some biological reasons for this too, which we can talk about later, but imagine a society in which women bleeding is what gives them their wisdom. And imagine then what that means for the culture, how they treat the period. So let's also think about the fact that 10,000 years ago, all over the world, all of these world religions were earth-based religions. The earth has the perfect creative cycle, all four of the seasons, which are the reason for rejuvenation. Well, who has the cycles within them? The rejuvenation cycle every month, which matches to the moon cycle. So you think about earth-based religions thinking, well, who knows better, you know, Mother Earth and Grandmother Moon than the women who have it living inside of them? And so it was then seen as this sacred, life-giving event that was the perfect creative cycle and perfect wisdom cycle. Wow. Compared to now, which we think of as an inconvenience, something we need to plug and drug. It's something that, you know, women can't be president because what happens if she were to bleed while you know,
I've heard that before. Yeah.
She's got the red button on her desk. I mean, this is ridiculous, but this is how we feel now versus 10,000 years ago, when it's literally like the moon and the earth cycles alive in a human form.
Yeah, I heard there was there's a connection too between there's a monthly cycle, and it all goes with the moon, that there's a monthly cycle in the moon. Then there's a seasonal cycle that also women go through, just like the seasons of the earth. And then a lifetime too, like where our phases of, becoming teen and then going into menopause. And I thought that was really interesting. I had interviewed a girl that talked about how they're all interconnected and how women have these seasons and these cycles the same as Earth does. Like that to me is mind blowing. I think everybody should think that is mind blowing, that this is, nobody talks about this. You don't get your period and you're not told like, hey, this is the most, beautiful, amazing thing. You're so connected with the moon. I remember trying to tell my daughter about that recently, and she was like, what are you talking about, Mom?
Yeah, but you know what? Plant that seed. Even if she's not super into hearing that right now, the best thing you could actually do is as a mother, modeling this for our daughters is actually living in cycle. And we can talk about that a little bit more too. But even if you just plant that seed, it will grow in a way, just like the cultural seeds of negativity have grown and shame have grown. So don't underestimate, even if she's not really hearing it right now, like even planting the seeds of positivity and cycles and being in connection with something bigger than herself.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Actually, I would like to hear about getting in touch with the cycle and how we can, how different it is in your world compared to what most women are living. How you can get in tune with it, how to do that.
Well, let's start at the baseline, which is menstruation, because it's the easiest place to start. But also the way that you bleed will dictate the rest of your cycle. So it's very important. And so like me working in production, I didn't have time. I was literally taking drugs and just pretending it wasn't happening, versus how I deal with my period now, which is I really check in with my body, going back to that, what do you have to say when you whisper? What do you need? If I'm in a lot of pain, so really slowing down to the best of my abilities, really taking some time for myself. But I want to go back to the biology. Remember we talked about the red tent wisdom and these like visions and meditations or dreams that women would get in the moon lodge or the red tent would then inform the decisions of the tribe. There's a biological reason for that. There's a spiritual reason based in biology. So what happens when we bleed is that the left and right syntax of our brain fire equally. That's the emotional and rational. They fire the most equally of our entire cycle. And so what happens is that if we actually slow down, make some space, whatever is heavy on our hearts right now, maybe in our family or community or work, we can get clear on, does this feel good in my body, the emotional part? And does this make sense logically, the logical part? So it's really a time when like, oh, things can happen. And it may not be linear. It may be a dream that you have or a vision that you have in the 20-minute meditation that you do during that time. This is really exciting superpower of menstruation that we often miss. Another really exciting thing that happens is that oxytocin, which is the be-all, end-all feel-good hormone, is what makes our uterus contract. And we know that often from childbirth, the flood of oxytocin when the baby's born. But it also on a mini level is happening every time we bleed. And so to actually take time, like one of the things that wash over us is love and peace and happiness and this like rejuvenation of energy to continue going on with our lives. As you know, women carry a lot of things. So this is the ultimate rejuvenation cycle. This is the winter of our cycle. This is the time, if you think about winter, we get a little cozy, get a little quiet, we light a fire, take care of ourselves. Our energy is more inward facing. It's more about like, okay, what is really going on? Maybe journaling, taking some time. So what happens when we take that winter, our menstruation, and slow down as much as our body is asking for, we then resurface in the spring with some of these, I'll just keep calling them superpowers that continue. So your energy, you can really starts to pick back up. The springtime, if you think about spring in the earth cycles, is the most creative cycle. You're literally at your creative peak. This is the perfect time to start new projects. So you've maybe had the aha moment in your winter, your menstruation, and then it's time to actually put it into action, start new things, start making calls, making plans, getting your calendar ready. And you start to be able to be more outward facing. You start to be able to speak more clearly. This is the time where your motor skills, you're like able to communicate more. And that just continues as your estrogen increases until you get to your summer. You're literally the most attractive at this time to yourself and to others. You're more able to put yourself in other people's shoes. So think of this as the summertime. It's the short shorts and bikini. This is the time to put yourself out there. This is the time when you're most able to speak. This is the best time to ask for a raise or to have a hard conversation with your partner.
Or to go get a partner.
Or to go get it. Yes, exactly. Schedule all your dates.
Mm-hmm.
You're on a bunch of dating apps, like schedule your dates in the spring and the summer, because it's the time your feel-good hormones are at their peak. You're less sensitive. It's time to get a bikini wax because you're physically and emotionally less sensitive. And what I noticed in my life is when I did take that time to rest and rejuvenate as much as I needed in the winter, my summer was so much more productive. I needed less sleep. I could see more people. I could do all sorts of things that I maybe didn't have the energy for in the winter. And so if you think about productivity in a 28-day cycle or however long your cycle may be, I'm still getting the same amount of things done. It just didn't look like 9 to 5, push, doesn't matter what my body says. It's women are more like this.
Yeah.
And so my productivity would ebb and flow, and that was okay because I was still getting the same amounts of things done. So then sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to interject there quickly to say, when I figured this out, ladies, it was the most amazing tool to use in my life because I started to see exactly what she's talking about here, which was we'll just compare it to my business. So I noticed that, as my period started to end, I started to that was when I was even just a couple days in, that's when all my creative juices would start flowing. And I found it was so much easier to work and get really into what I was doing with my business. And then, as the second half of my cycle came along, I would work less and I would go more inward. I would do more things like reading and, taking more time for myself. And I started to listen to this rhythm that she's talking about, and instead of fighting it, I worked with it, and it was literally life-changing when I started doing that.
It's so true. And the interesting thing, I think, is that it's not necessarily the same for everyone. So I really encourage women to track their cycle, because you could have a really high energy day on day 3, which one of my friends does after years of tracking. She calls it her queen day, her day where she can get anything done. And that's actually a day where she's bleeding, whereas my superpower day is day 7. So it's nice to start tracking, start making little notes, and to see where your ebbs and flows may be, and to notice, are there patterns month to month? And if that's the truth, if you see some patterns, how can you start to arrange your schedule around these times where, wow, this is my queen day, or whatever you want to name it, my superpower day, my unstoppable day. I'm going to move all these things that I've struggled getting done to that day. I'm going to know that it's going to get done.
Yeah, I realized that I had, the closer I got to my period, when I had the bad PMS times, that's when I would start to have insecurities, and I started to be able to recognize it and be like, that's okay. They'll be gone in a week. Once I get my period, I won't feel like this anymore. Right. Because it's just the 100%. Emotional, roller coaster basically, but it's better to get in tune with it than to fight it. Right. Mm-hmm.
Which one of my teachers calls the rabbit hole. So that leads us into the 4th cycle, the autumn, the fall. So we've left ovulation, summer, and now we're in the cycle you're talking about, which is the fall, which is the most notorious part of the cycle, PMS. It's the only one that really gets talked about, but it never gets talked about in a very positive way. It gets talked about in a way of like, clear the path because, you know, this wild woman is unleashed. And what happens here is that your feel-good hormones drop out. This is your immunity also drops out. It's the time when it's the easiest to get sick, when it's the easiest to get down on yourself, to give up. If you have endometriosis, this is going to be a time where there's a lot of pain. But the superpower available here is that you become really detail oriented. There's nothing that gets by you. Your BS meter is at 100%. You can see the BS in yourself and in others. Excuse me. And so it's a time when really, like, it's a great time to go through your books, you know, like nothing gets past you at this time. And so to take that energy and to utilize it for you, this is a great time to edit your book, because you can really see the things that aren't up to par and you know, aren't grammatically correct, and you're not going to have a hard time crossing it right out. So to capitalize on that energy, and to also realize, just like the leaves falling off the trees, you're being called inward, like what's going on, knowing it's hard for you to feel good about yourself, but having the awareness to know that soon will pass. And B, this is your body asking you for more self-care, so that you don't get sick, so that you don't run yourself ragged, so that you're gentle with yourself when your feel-good hormones are low. And then that starts again into the winter.
See, I love it. And so in your opinion from working with so many women, and this is what you do, and you've suffered with endometriosis like I have, I definitely have found personally that it happened because there was a disconnect. And I really believe that. I believe that I was disconnected from my pelvis, from my sexual energy, and disease developed. So do you see that working in your practice, that we're in a serious rise of infertility, endometriosis, PCOS, ovarian cysts, you name it, women are having it down there. What's your opinion about what's going on there? Is it because this society disconnect that's happening?
100%. Yes. Yes, that and more, I think, in my opinion. We have so many toxins also in our environment. You know, you're exposed to more toxins in 30 days than your grandmother was in 30 years. And so am I. If you're an average woman, you put 150 chemicals on your face before you leave the house in the morning, or on your body rather. That is really wreaking havoc on our systems. I loved what Christiane Northrup said about endometriosis in her book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. And this was another, kind of clue. That's
a classic. Yeah.
Amazing book. This is another clue on my trail, of discovery. But she really talks about what the physical and emotional causes of disease are. And so she said on endometriosis, that endometriosis is a blood sacrifice to the goddess. And so I thought, what does that mean? It really said it's a call back to women's most feminine nature.
Oh, wow.
What does that mean? I really feel like it's an initiation for women. It's women being called to rise, to be more in their feminine, which I definitely needed to be personally, but also as a call to Mother Earth. Like Mother Earth, speaking of cycles being off, if you think about, like it's still snowing in April or May in some parts of the world, like her menstrual cycle is off. She's calling her daughters to say, like, you are destroying yourselves and you're destroying the world. And so I really think, on the spiritual side of my opinion about this is it is an initiation. It is a call back to something bigger than ourselves. It is a call to remember we are part of an ecosystem and she's hurting. And so where are her daughters to say, as much as I'm hurting myself with my disconnection from my own cycles and all the toxicity that I'm pouring into myself, how is this also affecting the larger, the mother
global,
and femininity as a whole? Like where is her voice in this? I really find that this is a really big thing, because when women are disconnected from their bodies, they're disconnected from their feelings. When they're disconnected from their feelings, they're disconnected from their voice. When they're disconnected from their voice, they don't speak out when things are amiss. And so what I found is by reconnecting to my body and really trusting it, I reconnected with my feelings, reconnected with my voice, and now I'm not afraid to use it. If all women could then reconnect with their bodies, feelings, and voice, we would stand up and say, enough of all of these atrocities that are happening to children, to men, to women, to the planet, to animals, like enough. And so I really do think that it is a blood sacrifice of the goddess. It is femininity, nurturing compassion, Mother Earth waking us back up, saying enough. Use your voice, reconnect with your body, and like stand for health and wholeness. And what does that look like in the feminine? It looks like compassion and nurturing and taking care of one another.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is something that we're, like I always say, we've come so far with feminism, but yet we've come so far away from it at the same time. Like, yes, we've got our rights back, but at the same time, we've almost shot ourselves in the foot because now we're trying to balance everything and we have forgotten about the inside. We're so outward, and our focus is on attaining things and being as strong and powerful as a man is and trying to get that equality in that world. And then in the meantime, we still are suffering just as much as we were 100 years ago, as far as being disconnected and shamed about our insides, about our sexual health, about our reproductive health. There is still this crazy gap that needs to be put back together again, because I don't even know, like, when would you even say that this disconnect started to happen? Like, I would say probably when Christianity came in. No offense at all towards Christianity, but I think that was a big, from what I've read in the research, that's definitely when things shifted and we began to feel we were told that we were dirty, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the research I've done, I would say it was about 4,000 years ago. So even pre-Abrahamic religions, not all Abrahamic religions, but Christianity or Islam, there's significant evidence on the planet that we were partnership based, meaning that the feminine and masculine were equal all over the planet. There are so many goddess statues and so many shrines and caves, to the yoni or with moon goddesses in the front of caves, and then something switched. And my favorite resource for this is Riane Eisler. She's an amazing author. I love her book, The Chalice and the Blade. It was literally like taking the red pill from the Matrix, where I couldn't see the world the same way after reading it. But she talks a lot about Maria Gamboudas, who's a famous feminist archaeologist, and her work. And that basically it was about 4,000 years ago when we switched from the greatest power on earth being the ability to give life, to the greatest power on earth being the ability to take life. We switched to patriarchal control as opposed to masculine and feminine, equality, and coming together to create life being the greatest power.
Wow. Yes. I would love to actually get into more of that history. I've just read little books and stuff about, paganism, and basically how when Christianity came in, it was that men that was when men were taking over and women were starting to be put down here, basically. And there was a women's Holocaust even. I don't think many people know about that. I don't know if you've heard about it, but
100%.
In Europe, there was
100%.
that no one ever talks about. It was never put into history books, nothing, but there was, they estimated, and correct me if I'm wrong, like they think either tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of women were murdered because they were apparently witches. So 100%. They were burned. So
yeah.
Is that true? Like I read this like 20 years ago, so correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. And so, I think this is also in our cells while we're afraid sometimes to use our voices. But 100%, yeah, this happened all throughout Europe. I mean, you could be burned at the stake or drowned for collecting medicinal herbs, being a midwife, communing with animals. So like the things that we were killed for being witches for, are things now that we essentially got stripped of our power, any sort of, intuition or compassion. And these are the things now that there are ways that we, again, are coming to express our femininity. But yeah, we were killed for these things. And in the Americas too, we had our own mini sort of Holocaust. But yeah, women or people who were compassionate towards women were killed all throughout Europe. Some people say in the millions, but then others say the hundreds of thousands. So we don't really know the numbers, but it's 100% true.
And how sad that we don't know the numbers. That's crazy. We should know the numbers. This was like brushed under the carpet. You know, we talk about the Jewish Holocaust, but we don't talk about this women's Holocaust that happened. I remember reading that and just being like, what the hell? Like, why have I never heard of this ever before? And still haven't heard of it since reading about it back then, watching. It was it was a documentary I think I watched, and just being like awestruck, going, what? How did this happen? I didn't know about it. So,
well, because women aren't really in history books.
No, we're not. You're right.
So that's why. They kind of leave us out.
Yeah, they really do. Oh my gosh. Hey. So if a woman is just, if they're listening to us talking about this, it's new to them, which for, I think most it would be. How do you even begin this journey of becoming more feminine or getting in touch with your cycle? Like, do you have little tools that you'd be able to share with us?
Sure. The first one I would say is cycle tracking. And this can be as easy as having an Excel document that you start to write things down. Or, you know, I have a chart that I give to the students that I work with. It just kind of looks like a pie chart and you just write down every day. Or it can be as easy as an app. There are some apps that I love. There's one that's that's free. It's called Hormone Horoscope. Both my husband and I have it. And every day when I was bleeding, I'm pregnant now, as I told you, but every day when I was bleeding for years, we would, before bed, write a little note about what my energy was like, maybe what I was really hungry for, you know, if I was really cuddly or really wanted distance from him. I would track just, 30, 60 seconds, we would write a little note. And what my husband found astonished him because he was like, wow, my wife is so predictable. She sometimes says the exact same things on the exact same days, month to month. Or I have an Astro Burger day where I have to have an Astro Burger. So he knows now, after tracking my cycles for a year, he just brings me an Astro Burger. Or he knows like, oh, this is the day I go bowling with my buddies and I kind of give my wife some space. So tracking revolutionizes relationships with your own body as well. You can start to really see. I would say track a minimum of 3 months before you really start to notice some patterns.
Yes, I'm just going to interject just very quickly because I do track mine. I use period love. I don't track the emotions because I've got that down now. But my husband, the same thing. He is so in tune now. He knows now when to come and ask for sex, when sex has to look different even. Like there's time, when we're in summer, it's like, come and get it. When we're heading into the autumn, it's like, if you want it, you have to be really sweet. There has to be a lot of foreplay. There has to be some, like really kind. It has to be it's a different energy, right? And he is so in tune with it now. And he's like, I can't imagine that men don't know this. He's like, that was the best thing I could have ever learned was where you are in your cycle. So I understand it. And then he also goes through an emotional cycle the same as I do. Like when I'm in the autumn, we'll call it PMS time, he's PMSing too. He's grouchy. He's more introverted. I got to get him to talk more, to communicate what he's feeling. And then I'll be like, if I happen to say, oh, I'm just before my period, he'll be like, oh, okay, well, that's why I'm feeling like this. Because he starts to feel the same way as I do. So it's the chemicals. It's not just with women that cycle together. I really feel like I cycle with my husband now as well. So, okay, so go on.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I also love that you mentioned that more foreplay in the autumn, because that is actually biologically based as well, is that it's harder. The lubrication takes a little longer. Orgasm is harder to reach. So the fact that you guys know that is so cool. So,
yes, I just want to say that's probably some of the best advice women can find out is learn this just for your sex life and tell your
100%.
husband about it. Like, hey, when I'm ovulating during this, like right after my period till just after ovulation, you got this like 1 week where come and get it.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
then it's got to
also,
shift.
100%. But also your clitoris is the most sensitive during menstruation. And your cervix is the most sensitive during ovulation.
Okay.
So
Wow.
sex does change, and what you want changes, and where it feels good. So that's really fun in relationship or even self-pleasure to experience and experiment with what feels good. And it's not always the same.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. And there's even different orgasms in the cycle. 100%. Very different how they feel on the inside. So yeah. Okay.
So it starts to get so exciting when we start to see ourselves as, our biggest mascot is the moon. We look at the moon and we don't say, oh, what's wrong with her? She's crazy. She can't make up her mind. Sometimes she's bright. Sometimes she's dark. It's crazy. No, we don't do that because we've taken the time to track the moon, and we can say, oh, isn't it beautiful when it's in this phase, and isn't it beautiful in this, and look how these things are different and how things look different with the light. Well, the same is true, and it's so exciting of the feminine body, is that we are a little bit different hormonally every day. And it's beautiful and exciting, especially when we get time to track it. And it becomes a lot less scary because when we're in the dark, we know the light is coming. When we don't know that, it can be a lot more scary, and we feel like, we are erratic, and it's just not true.
No.
Tracking, number one tool that I give to women. The second tool I would say is just to tune in to your womb. And that can be a little hard at first. It kind of feels like a part we don't tune into very often. We don't even really use the word very often. We talk about the belly a lot, but even just like a few minutes a day, maybe right when you get up or right before bed, just like breathing into the womb, like this really central part of yourself, this deep part of yourself. And just like you're speaking to it a little bit. Hello. I feel you. Anything you want to share today? It's this like deep, deep central part of your femininity and creativity, and just dropping down into the deepest parts of yourself. And to notice that things start to shift. It can almost be like a silent friend at first that needs to, you kind of have to like gain its trust. But I find that when I check in, like, okay, what does my head think about this issue? What does my heart think about this issue? What does my womb say? It's like the deepest voice. It's like the deep parts of myself. And so, I think that's really great place to start with reconnecting to our femininity. And one thing I would like to say is, having worked with all sorts of different women, like sometimes reconnecting with the self and the true self and femininity means, one of my friends was like, for me, it meant growing my leg hair out, which I never would think more hair meant more femininity. But for me, that's what she said. Well, that's her experience. For my experience, it's more like actually taking time to wear a pretty dress, or, to take care of myself, to spend time with girlfriends, to spend time in nature, to, connect with my deepest center. So it just, femininity looks so different to all sorts of different women, that it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's just really getting in touch with your true feelings in situations and being able to live a life that's more true to those things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. I definitely found that it was giving myself permission to be soft. And, I'm this business-minded kind of type A, go person. And now when I'm going through that cycle, I know when I just need to be okay with being softer and just letting myself come down that notch, and being okay to be weak almost. Like, and I say that in the nicest way, the weak. I don't mean like, oh, weak and weakness. It was more like, I just need to be soft and be okay with showing my emotions and asking for help and, and that's it. Really, I guess it's not weakness. It was switching that for me and becoming more powerful by allowing myself to feel that way and ask for help was more
100%.
like it. Yes.
And you were talking about kind of like the, feminism, where we've had to have feminism the way that we have to demand, equality, but it's almost like you've said, where we've become equals, but we've almost had to pretend that we're men by shutting down our feelings, pretending we don't bleed, and if not, we get culturally punished for it. So the next wave of feminism, I believe, is exactly what you're saying. It's then being in these positions of authority, but also having the logical and the emotional brain be both welcome, so that we're making compassionate, nurturing choices for ourselves, our others, and the planet, but also being in positions of authority and having that be okay. So the more we run our businesses, the more we show up authentically, vulnerably, like thinking of things in partnership. Like that to me is femininity. Showing up, don't have to be short hair and a pantsuit to run for president. Like I would like to see someone running for president or, or prime minister, like with long hair and a dress, like showing up authentically as who you are as a woman in positions of authority.
Yeah. So what about women that are on birth control? Because I definitely, what I hear very often in my practice is I'm on birth control, and it could even be, I think it's usually affecting them in some way, toxin wise and hormonally, right? So I always say, if there's a different route you can take, come off the pill, because I don't believe I think it's one of the most toxic things we can be taking. They always come back and say, oh, but I love not getting my period. How out of touch are women from this when they're on a birth control that's suppressing their period, that's suppressing ovulation? Is it even possible?
Well, there's lots of things that happened for me with endometriosis. What I always say is I was on birth control for 15 years. And essentially what happened for me was my endometriosis grew and grew and grew. And with birth control, basically, it was like taking the batteries out of the smoke alarm. So I wasn't in touch with my cycles. I didn't know that the house was burning down, but I had completely shut off my sensors to listen to what was really happening. So my disease progressed, I think, because birth control completely shut down my cycle and therefore my communication system. My body couldn't communicate with me. So that's number one. Number two, there's all sorts of things about vitamin deficiencies and long-term health issues and contributing to infertility. Not to mention it's a health risk, that women do have all sorts of health complications because of birth control. I am a big proponent of allowing women the freedom to choose without any sort of additional shame from myself. So I'm of the mindset that women just don't know the whole picture.
Yes.
And so my job is to say there's a whole new chapter to your relationship with your body and your relationship with your period that you haven't read yet and you maybe didn't even know existed. And so read this chapter and then decide. Ultimately, your relationship with your body is your own. There are many, many side effects. One of them is also it can change the type of person you're attracted to. And so some women go on the pill and find they're not attracted to their partner at all, or go off the pill and find they're repulsed by their partner. Like it just changes so many things hormonally. Like, do you really know who you are if you're suppressing this big part of yourself? But that's not for me to decide. So read the whole book, read the next chapter, and then decide without judgment from me what's best for you and your body.
Yes. I think it's just, and I always say that, I'm like, if you're going to be on it, know both sides of the story, because we're taking it from our doctors. We're not asking any questions. We're really excited because we have no period. This is like, woohoo. Nobody reads the fine print. Nobody goes out and research, which is actually very challenging to find information about just how toxic birth control pill is. So I always say, like, just due diligence and learn both sides. I had a client recently who she's a 15-year-old girl. Her periods were pretty heavy. So the dad was like, yeah, we're going to throw her on the pill, you know, and he's just talking like, this is the answer. And what do you think? And I'm like, like, listen, all I ask is that you do research on the other side of what that, I said, plus you're masking something. Why is she bleeding so heavy? Why doesn't she feel so well? It's like women that are getting a hysterectomy because they've had these horrible periods and they're bleeding like crazy. And the doctor's like, well, let's just rip it out then. It's like, well, but that's just a Band-Aid. We're not actually, that doesn't solve why you're bleeding that heavy. So I just ask that every woman says, why is this happening first? Or, you know, before you go on birth
100%.
control, what's the other side, right?
100%.
And listen to what Jamie's saying here about that there's this amazing, beautiful purpose behind it. And there is a way that you can get a beautiful, natural period that isn't painful and isn't horrible by getting in tune with what your body's trying to tell you. Right,
100%.
Jamie?
100%. One thing that I loved that one of my teachers, I've studied with so many teachers on this subject, like I said, but one thing that one of my teachers said, Alexandra Pope, she was one of the founders of the Red School, is she said, by decreasing stress, we can decrease our symptoms by up to 75%. But decreasing stress in this way, not necessarily like, you know, if we think about taking things off of our work plate. If you know that your winter is coming and you're tracking it and you know your cycle's coming, and you know you're going to take a long lunch, or you're going to get a foot massage after work, or you've asked your husband to go bowling with his friends, so you get home and the whole house is yours. If you're decreasing stress, telling your body, okay, I've got half an hour of personal time for you later, where you just get to take a bath or you just get to go to bed early, you can decrease that stress. It's like your body goes, okay, you've got the message. You're planning some downtime. You can decrease your symptoms by 75%. By that one thing alone, just knowing that your cycle's coming and knowing that, okay, I've got your back. I'm going to take some time. And if women knew that, I think that, you know, 75% is a huge number. And I absolutely found that to be true for my own self.
Yes. And even on the nutrition side, that's one thing I always tell women is, if you want to go through perimenopause the best way possible, decrease your stress. There isn't anything that's going to affect it as much as stress is. And same with your period. There's nothing worse for hormone dysfunction than there is stress. And so if you're highly stressed or you're working against your body, I always tell women, even during that second half of their cycle or when they're nearing it, that's maybe not the time that you go to the gym and you work out and you do cardio and you're lifting weights. Go do some yoga that week. Like, listen to the body, right?
Yeah, 100%. And you get in better shape faster that way. We're not linear. We're not supposed to be working 9 to 5, push. We're not supposed to be working out like that either. We are living in a society that's designed for the linear being, the masculine. The masculine is like the sun. It rises and sets every day. Sometimes there's clouds in front of it, but it's showing up. We are the moon. We change just a little bit every day. So if we can show up in our lives, in our personal lives, in our work lives, in our workouts, exactly what you're saying, the ebb and flow, you'll be able to lift so much more weight in your summer if you're doing yoga or taking walks in nature or taking a couple days off in your winter.
Yeah, it even goes with eating. Like I tell women, there is a cycle to your eating habits. Follow it. When it's easy to not eat sugar, and which is during your period and afterwards until you ovulate, it's so much easier to stay away from the crappy foods. So save the times when you need to eat the dark chocolate, or I always you can count on me eating ice cream the week before my period comes. And I am 100% okay with that. So I always say save it for the times that you really need it when your body, and there's a reason for it. Our serotonin drops. We make serotonin with carbohydrates. So we crave these foods. And I really think you should listen to it. You know, you don't have to eat ice cream, but you can eat fruits or Astro Burger day. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, you get it.
Yes, I really do get it. So can you tell us a little bit about if somebody's interested in listening, after listening to this, in exploring more, what does it look like working with you in your coaching sessions?
Great. Thanks for asking. One thing I really found in taking all of these different classes and diving into my research was there was a lot of the kind of really out there spiritual side. Then there was the medical biological side. And then there was all this ancient history side. And so I went to all these different avenues, but I didn't ever find a course that had all three, that could just say like, here is the whole story of menstruation. And so that is the course that I've created, which I'm launching this summer. It's all three of those big pieces of the puzzle. So the best way I would say to work with me right now is the most comprehensive, like from beginning of the story until the end of your story is to take that 8-week online class, which I'm launching, which will be so fun because it will be a group of women. We'll all be learning these things together. I'll be accessible to you. And then it's like everything that I wish I had accessible to me. That, you know, this work took me 4+ years to find. And so I just was like, man, I wish there was a course like this. I wish there was a course like this. So I just created it. The other thing I do is I do private sessions, like one-on-one sessions, but I find that it's better to have a little bit of basis of the knowledge before we go into those sessions. I have gone to womb shamanism school for a year, so I do some guided meditations into the womb, which can be really fun. I do those in my private sessions. It can be really like we actually go into that creative space and like, what do we want to birth from here? So that's something that's kind of unique that I do in my one-on-one sessions. And I find that women who do this work together, it's like PMS, it doesn't have to be the thing that it is. I find that women who know this work just become more blossomed versions of who they truly are, and their symptoms that were controlling their lives become of service and not of consequence.
Yeah. And so do you do one-on-one, just private one-to-one sessions in person, or do you do online as well?
I do mostly online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have a start date for the 8-week online course for those that are listening?
I don't, but I would guess it would probably be July.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Every time I think it's coming, it's, there's something else that I want to add. And so I keep adding things to it. So at some point I do need to say, okay, this is the whole story. So it will be soon. It will be in the next couple of months. And then I'll roll that out probably 4 times a year with each cycle, with each season.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. Well, by the time this airs, hopefully we'll have the link and we will put it in the show notes. So be looking for that. If not, you can find Jamie at periodlove.com. Super easy. And do you have a Facebook?
I do. Yes. It's Period Love Community.
Oh, super. Okay. So there you go. Period Love Community on Facebook. Well, thank you, Jamie, for your insight on this. I think it's been amazing and something, like I said, needs to be talked about more. So I really appreciate you coming here and talking to us about this today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.